My first day in prison, I got cut across my face. I guess I've got that big scar all the way across to the back of my neck. That was my first day in a New York State prison.
Hey, Thomas, it's a pleasure to get a chance to speak with you.
Likewise, likewise. Pleasure to be here talking to you.
So, to give people a little background on how this interview came to be, I was doing a live stream a week ago. You were in the chat, told me that you had served 27 years in prison in the state of New York. We began talking after that live stream, and here we are today.
Yeah, we made it.
Are you nervous about this?
No, not really.
You've got a really crazy story. What led you to prison? Obviously, it's not glamorous at all. Talk to us about how you ended up with 27 years.
Sure, sure. So I'll take it back to my youth, my early teens. I was a street kid, and I was on my own from the age 12, 13 years old. I was out there on my own, surviving how I could, and I settled down. My profession pretty much became selling drugs, and a lot of violence came with that. And I got shot during basically a turf war. It was basically war over a drug location. I got shot, during one of those conflicts, and I kind of lost my shit after that. After that, I just decided, like, you got to fight fire with fire. And I fell under that whole mentality, and living under that whole street code, man. And it's an ignorant way of living, but it's how I was living. I fought fire with fire, and I began using weapons myself. And yeah, I went down a bad rabbit hole.
You end up with two murder charges, if I'm correct, at a young age, at
Yes.
16 years old.
Yeah. Yeah. One of those. I'm guilty of both. I was guilty of both. One was actually, over a beef over a drug spot. It was a drug war, basically. Over the right to sell on a particular block in Brooklyn. A block none of us own property on, none of that. Just area to open drug market to sell crack. And yeah, and I was 16 years old, and I shot another young man, 17 years old, 13 times, taking his life.
Unbelievable. And I mean, I can
Yeah,
imagine that stays with you, at this point in your life as well.
it does. It does. It's something that it doesn't go away. You're talking 30, 33 years ago, and it's alive, it's fresh, it's at the forefront of my mind every day.
The plus side, or the positive side, I should say, is after prison, where you currently are in life, you're doing a lot better, and a lot of positive things too. We're going to be talking about that in this interview, but I want to ask just a few questions in relation to the
Sure.
charges. You have two murder charges. How do you end up with 27 years? I would imagine that you're probably sentenced to life in both of those.
No, well, what happened was, on one case, I was found guilty at trial. I was sentenced to 25 years to life. And on the other case, I pled out. I pled guilty in exchange for 6 to 18 years running concurrent with the 25 years of life.
Wow.
And on the 25 life, I really did 26, but I did a year on Rikers for a gun charge that I wasn't credited for. So, when it was all said and done, I'm doing 27 years, 26 years, 9 months to be exact.
I don't want to like overreach with your story here, but you get 25 to life, ran concurrent with both of those crimes. It sounds like maybe your prison experience was you were trying to do the right thing if you only ended up doing 25 years for those charges. Were you getting in trouble while you were incarcerated? And, what was your prison experience like?
Yeah, I got in a ton of trouble in my earlier years in prison. I spent about 10 and a half years, being confined, what's known as SHU or the box, or also what's called keep lock, long-term keep lock and keep lock. And I spent about 10 and a half years confined. No, when I went into the system, one, I was young, I was skinny, and as you can see, I'm white. I'm Cuban. I'm half Cuban, half Irish, but for all intents and purposes, I appear white. And that made me a target. All those three things, being young, skinny, and white, made you a target in New York State prison. And I had to fight. I had to stand up for myself on a lot of occasions. And like the street, I followed same thing. At a certain point, I started picking up weapons. I started using weapons, and that landed me in a hell of a lot of trouble. My first day in prison, I got cut across my face. I guess I've got that big scar all the way across to the back of my neck. That was my first day in a New York State prison.
Oh my God. I mean, that is an extensive scar you got right there.
Yeah, yeah. It's a reality that it's part of the ugly side that I wish some of these young people would be able to see more as opposed to the glamorizing of the criminal lifestyle.
If you don't mind, can we see that scar one more time? I just want that to really sink in for people. That was your first day in prison, and you were cut across your face.
Yeah,
Obviously, pretty deep.
yeah.
What was that in
Yeah.
relation to? Was that just somebody just attacking you for, your skin color for no good
No,
reason?
no, I wasn't an innocent victim in that. It had to do with a problem I had with another prisoner that I cut him. That I cut him on Rikers Island, and some of his people retaliated against me.
Wow.
So
Well,
I can't say I was just a victim or nothing. I was in the mix doing stupid shit myself.
I don't know a lot about New York and their prison system, but it certainly sounds like it's no walk in the park at all.
No, nah, it wasn't, man. It wasn't, man. I remember, early on being young, I got my cheekbone broke. I got jumped, stomped out, cheekbone broke. Dudes were trying to rob me for a watch and a pair of sneakers. Like you had to, when I was a kid going through Rikers Island and all that stuff, you had to fight for everything. You know what I'm saying? You really did, or you'd be a victim.
What were the gangs like in there? Did you have to click up? I would imagine that's probably pretty tough in there with the gangs.
No, I was in an era where I seen the rise of a lot of big gangs come through New York State prison, rise up and become really big. But no, that I stayed away from that. I stayed away from that. I don't think I was ever cut out for that. A lot of it had a lot of racial overtones. You had gangs that were predominantly one race or predominantly another, and I really didn't want to adhere to that. I kind of went against the grain with that. I didn't always follow all those little unwritten prison guidelines.
I just want to ask because I'm curious. I don't want to make this a race issue here at all. But when I
Sure.
think about New York, I would imagine that the white guys in there are very scarce. Not scared, but just in
Yeah.
short supply. Do you have Aryans in there, or white, predominantly white gangs in there?
You had one white gang that was trying to come up, and they were mostly country kids from the upstate New York area, and they never really amounted to nothing.
Yeah,
Yeah, they
unreal.
don't they don't got a good track record. They didn't do too good.
I don't imagine that they do. When I think
They were
about
a bunch of country kids. Yeah, they were a bunch of white country kids from upstate New York.
I just think that it's just the image that I see on the media. When you look at New York situations, I would imagine that the white guys are in short supply in there, and I can imagine being, perceived as a white guy in there, you're going to have a lot more problems than if you were a black guy in there. Just calling it the way that it seems to me. You go up in here at a
Yeah.
young age. You are dealing with, and forgive me for over talking you right there, but you go up in there at a young age, and you're cut across your cheek, involved in stabbings, pretty much from the very first day that you're in there. How much, and then also mentioning that you spent 10 years in the shoe. how much of those 27 years that you did in total, how much of that time uh, was just violence and craziness and chaos?
Um, it wasn't like, every single day I was getting into something, but every every so often, I would say easily my first 15 years of the bid, I was always caught up in something. Whether it's a fist fight or another or altercation involving weapons, whether someone's using against me or I'm using against someone else, or about 15 years. It really took me a while to settle down, to mature, and to just break away. You know what I mean? Like I had to literally break away. I had to say, you know what, I don't even want to have a weapon no more. I'm done. I don't want to carry a weapon. I don't want to use a weapon. Um, a lot of my friends that I were hanging out with that were into, some hardcore stuff, or legal activities. These guys were selling drugs or they were extorting or they're doing what they're doing. I had to find a new circle. I had to walk away from them. And just like anything else, there's peer pressure, you know what I mean? And there's at the risk of looking soft, at the risk of um people having animosity towards you because you're not involved in the things you were involved in before, because you walk away from that life, you know what I mean? But it was something I had to do because I realized at a certain point, like I'm a young dude, I could get out of here. When you first get hit with 25 years of life, I was 19 years old, I had like 2.5 years on Rikers Island. I got sentenced to 25 years of life. That shit is crushing. Like you can't see 25 years when you're 19 years old. You can't see that far. I mean, right now, if I got 25 life right now, I couldn't see that far. But once I got halfway through it, 2/3 through it, I'm like, wow, I got a real shot. What do I want to do? I got a real shot at getting out there. What am I going to do to prepare myself so I can stay out there? What am I going to do to prepare myself? First of all, forget about staying out of prison. What am I going to do to prepare myself for a parole board for them to even consider allowing me out to prison? Because when you have life, they intend that life. They can keep you for the rest of your life. And I just had to really mature. I had to really mature and change my ways.
There's so much that I want to ask, and as you talk, I get a million questions, and then by the time I get a chance to talk, I forget every single bit of it. You mentioned that about 15 years of your incarceration was, ripping and running, involved in all the craziness. Do you feel like that was mostly because of the fact that you were a young guy thrown to the wolves, basically, or was that the way that you had to carry it in there? Could you get away with staying out of the way in there?
Um, some people are better at staying out of the way than others. Some people could get away with staying out of the way. Not many. What can I say? You stay in your lane. If you don't get involved with certain things, you minimize what comes at you. But when you're a younger prisoner, things more than likely things are gonna come at you. You're gonna get tested. You're gonna get tried, and you got to go through some shit. You got to stand up. You got to put some work in, and then usually after that, you find your lane. You find people who are doing the right thing as opposed to the wrong thing. Me, I was a little bit of both. I wasn't necessarily a bad dude. I wasn't a real bad guy, none of that. But I just kind of had friends that were doing good, and I had friends who were doing bad. And the doing bad also appealed to me as ways to make money, as ways to earn money while I was locked up. Hustling and doing. And really, when you think about it, these prison hustles, the things we were killing each other over, packs of cigarettes and a bag of weed, few grams of weed, few grams of heroin. Actually, a few grams of heroin is worth a lot of money in prison. In relatively speaking, though, relative prison terms, and like think about this, man. Like if a guy makes a move in prison, let's say he makes $2,000. He thinks he's balling. In reality, on the street, with that same kind of drive, determination, you can make way more than $2,000. And you don't even have to do it illegally. And it's when I started thinking about things like that. It's like, what am I taking these risks for? For what? For what? You know what I mean? It stopped making sense to me. The whole order of prison stopped making sense to me. The senseless violence stopped making sense to me. It was senseless, you know what I mean? And I wanted something different.
You mentioned prison hustles. What type of prison hustles did you have in there?
Well, selling weed was one of them. Selling weed for, and at times I sold heroin. I usually wasn't producing it, getting myself, but I had a pretty good name. I was trusted by people who knew me. Like people who knew me generally trusted me, generally liked me, and put confidence in me for some reason. And I would start hustling like that. It might start out with, God give me a certain amount of heroin. Maybe I get a gram of heroin for 250, $300. Try to flip that over, try to turn that into $600 or $700 out there, in the prison economy, and keep it going. And there were times where I was stick and move, where I might get something to hustle, try to get some of the things I need, stack my locker, and then I'm good for a couple of months. I wasn't doing that no more. But more weed. I was more hustling weed. It, different things at different times, but it was between heroin and marijuana. Those were the things I was hustling.
Completely off subject, switching gears.
Sure.
I want to go to this. You mentioned we were talking about staying out of the way. You mentioned that, as a young guy, you're probably not going to be able to stay out of the way as much because you're going to be tested. There's going to be other young guys and maybe even older guys in there that want to test you for whatever intention and purposes they may have. I've been working with a few younger guys who are facing going to prison, and I've been trying to consult them and give them uh, my opinion on what could potentially help them if they were having to go to prison. What advice would you give to a young person who was going to prison, especially a prison like where you started out at? Like, how would a young person who's never been in that situation before be able to circumnavigate that type of experience?
Well, first things first, you got to stand up for yourself. When you're tried, you're tested, whatever, you got to fight. You got to stand up. You can't. This is not like proper social behavior. You almost got to think in an antisocial way a little bit. Whereas, for example, if you're on the street and someone bumps into you or something, generally speaking, you're not going to trip out. It might be, excuse me, pardon me. It's not a big deal. In prison, when someone bumps into you, automatically you're thinking, "This dude trying me? Was it intentional? What's going on?" And you want to respond in an antisocial way. You want to respond aggressively. So I guess the first thing I would say is that you got to be fairly aggressive in the face of someone challenging you. Someone challenges you, you got to be aggressive. You got to step up. And the other thing I would tell them would be the some of the things that might not be common sense when you start with the common sense later. Don't involve yourself in drugs at all. Period. Don't borrow. Don't borrow. Don't involve yourself in drugs, and don't borrow anything. Not coffee, not candy, not cigarettes, none of that. And if you do those things, you probably going. And of course, there's common things. Don't mess around with men. Don't, as far as any homosexual activity, that's a problem in prison. And don't be a rat. And if you follow those things, you'll probably be able to skate through. You know what I mean? And definitely at all costs try to avoid the gangs, man. Try to not gang up. Don't click up, man. It might be harder without it. You might have to stand a little harder, but don't click up if you can.
Well, I appreciate your opinion on that. It's just good to be able to showcase different people who have been through prison experiences, their opinions for people who may not have ever been through it. I want to fast forward to the later part of your incarceration. You're starting to see that you're going to have another chance at life, or you could potentially have another chance at life. Let's fast forward to when you actually start going up for parole, because again, you served 25 years on the murder charges, correct? And then it was an additional
Yeah,
year for the gun charge. So that sounds
yeah.
like to me that did you make parole on your very first time going up?
No, on my second time. On my second time up. The first time they told me come back in 12 months, keep doing what I'm doing, stay out of trouble, yada yada. And in New York State, they can hit you with up to 24 months. The most they can hit you with is 2 years. And generally in New York prison, if they hit you with anything less than 2 years, they were probably going to let you go the next time if you don't screw that up, if you don't get in trouble. And I managed to keep myself out of trouble and got out in 2018.
You've been home since 2018 after doing 26 years. How hard was it for you, and was it harder for you trying to stay out of the way and keep your nose clean, so to speak? Was it harder for you to survive prison doing it the right way versus when you were involved in all of the wrong stuff?
That's a hell of a good question. Some things we, no, you know what? I think it was easier for me once I left all the bullshit alone. Because when you're living with when I'm not living with the anxiety of that, I'm trying to go through a magnometer with a razor in my mouth or something, hoping it don't ring, hoping it don't set this machine off. When you're not living with that stress, when you're not living with that anxiety, you sleep a little better, you feel a little better about yourself, you're more relaxed. Even in an environment where you can't really be relaxed, you want to be on your toes, you're not overcomplicating it. Life is not as hard as we usually make it. We usually overcomplicate life. And it's the same thing with the decisions and choices we make, with the lifestyle we live. Like for example, when I was involved in hustling and everything else, I would have to get up early in the morning, get all my contraband, get it together, hide it, disperse it, pass it off, do whatever I was going to do with it. Nighttime, I got to get stuff, take it out, put it away, worry about the COs raiding my cell, worrying about who's dropping a slip. There's constant anxiety, there's constant stress. You're constantly on edge. And when I stopped doing those things, I lost a lot of those anxieties. I lost a lot of those fears because I didn't have to fear a lot of those things no more. It was actually liberating. To tell you the truth, it's quite liberating.
Staying on that same thought, while you were keeping your nose clean, and especially maybe even like during the year that you weren't granted parole, waiting for that second opportunity to see if you would make parole, I got to imagine, and maybe I'm wrong, that there could have been situations that took place that you wanted to react to and that you had to walk away from or just turn a blind eye to, or just turn the other cheek to. Were there situations that you really wanted to respond to while you were trying to stay out of the way that you knew that you couldn't if you were going to stand a chance of being released?
In that last year, I can honestly say there wasn't nothing really serious other than arguments over playing dominoes. I used to play a lot of dominoes, but aside from that, no, there really wasn't. What I did notice though was that the closer I got to the pro board, the shorter my fuse was. The more things annoyed me, the more angry I got, the more in some ways I did want to get into a fight. It was just a lot of tension, a lot of anxiety. And I realized though I caught on to my because I caught on with other people. I started seeing that in other dudes I knew that had 15, 20, 25, 30 years in prison, that once they started getting close to that parole board, the anxiety started getting to them and their fuses were short. They were like time bombs. And I noticed the same thing in myself. I knew what it was though. I understood it. Like I was still, it was still happening. Like I was still having this huge rush of anger over the most minor, small things. But at the same time, I had this understanding, like chill out. This is because I'm getting short. because I'm going to the parole board. I got to weather the storm. It's hard to explain.
No, I get it. I mean, you're facing the opportunity of coming back out into the world, not knowing what to expect and being gone for so long. I can imagine that that was a part of the anxiety as well. I can understand how the frustration could definitely be intensified knowing that there's a possibility that you could be getting ready to be released.
Well, I went home from a really easy place to do time, a place called Ulster, which is a reception center, and I was what's called a cadre. I was one of only like 110 dudes who were actually workers who were general population was like 100 dudes who were basically working mess hall, working lawns and grounds, running the place. Everyone else it was just reception. So everybody was going home. So there wasn't a whole lot of shit going on. Plus, I was married at the time. At the time I was married, I had a wife. She was taking care of me. Anything I needed, the woman bent over backwards, made it happen for me. And that last year, I did real easy, to tell you the truth.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. Um, a lot that we could talk about right here. You said that you were married. Was this a woman that you met while you were serving time? Was she a prison pen pal at first?
Yeah, yeah. This is a woman I met serving time. We met through correspondence, writing letters. Actually, I used to write to a place called the Prison Dharma Network. They used to send free books on meditation, yoga, Buddhism, stuff like that to prisoners. And I should correspond with the director of the program. One of the volunteers was a young woman, started reading my letters. She wanted to write me. We started writing each other, and time went on, and we ended up getting married.
Stayed married until after you were released.
Yeah, so shortly after I was released, about 6 months after my release, everything fell apart.
Um,
We got married for the wrong reasons.
yeah, and sadly, that's a part of what happens with the prison pen pal situation. That if you don't know them out in the real world, it's hard to make a relationship work like that sometimes. Um,
Yeah.
let's go ahead and talk about what you do now. But before we talk about what you're doing now, um, what was your game plan, and was your game plan what you're doing now devised obviously while you were serving time?
Yeah, it was because like while I was doing time, like I was really into fitness. I got into boxing. Uh, and at a certain point, I had bad shoulders. I got bad arthritis in my shoulders. I couldn't keep up with the box. I couldn't work out the way I used to work out. And in prison, you get crappy medical care. Yeah, it's a
Yeah, yeah.
funny story. Like to give an example, I went to see this doctor one time. I'm going to see the doctor. I'm trying to get approval so I could go to see an outside doctor and possibly get shoulder surgery. So this doctor walks in. He tells me, "How'd you destroy your shoulder?" He's a little old man, little stocky old man with like a messed up arm. He said, "How'd you destroy your shoulder?" I said, "Probably, doing weighted dips, heavy bench press, pull-ups behind the neck, a lot of things like that." He's like, "So you destroy your shoulder and you expect the state to fix it for you now?" I'm like, "Damn," but I still trying to be humble because I need this dude to sign off on this. I said, "Well, I didn't know I was destroying my shoulder at the time." He said, "When I was 19, they sent me to Vietnam." He said, "You know what happens if you didn't know in Vietnam?" I said, "No, actually, I was never in war." "You died. That's what happened if you didn't know in Vietnam. You died." And he starts screaming on me. You know what I'm saying? And that's the perfect example of a prison doctor.
Yeah.
He caught a Vietnam flashback on me and started spazzing. Well, I'm trying to get my shoulder fixed, and he's just berating me and shit.
So, needless to say, you never got the shoulder fixed.
I did. It just took a long time, and
Uh,
they butchered the shit out of me.
might have been better off without it, but um, you were into fitness when you were locked up. Um, you get released. You make parole. Is your game plan when you get released to start some sort of a fitness gym or something like that, or do you not really
Yes.
have a game plan?
No, my game plan long before I released was to become a personal trainer because I got a background like what I was saying before. Once my shoulders were messed up, before I went off about the doctor, once my shoulders were messed up, I had to take care of myself. I had to learn how to stay fit on my own. and learn everything I could. And I started learning so much that I became like a go-to dude. I started training other people, and I was like, you know what? And they're getting results. And then I thought to myself, this is what I want to do. This is how I want to earn a living when I get out. I want to be a personal trainer. And I took a correspondence course while I was locked up and got my certification.
So you've come home and you're now a licensed personal trainer.
Yes, I'm nationally certified. I do everything online. I'm an online fitness coach.
How does that work?
How it works, my clients, I send them the way we met, like on the Zoom link. I usually have clients on a Zoom link, and I set it up where they're able to see my entire body. I can see them, and I instruct them, and I start teaching them from there. I've been fortunate, man. I don't know if I've been really fortunate in this game, man. I'm good at what I do, man. I'm really good at what I do.
And you've been successful with it, it sounds like.
Yeah, yeah, it's so far so good. I'm not a rich man by any means, but I'm making it. I started out, I was in a shelter when I came out of prison. And from a shelter, I got kicked out of a shelter. I had a physical altercation with someone, with an old man, a crazy dude actually. And I got kicked out of the shelter. I was homeless for 4 days. I eventually rented a room. When I rented a room, I continued working personal training until then I began sharing an apartment with two other dudes. So I got my own apartment, then another apartment, and then I moved out of state. Then I left New York and came down to Florida.
Oh, you're in Florida now.
I am now in Florida with my fiance and a child on the way,
Man, congratulations to you.
and two dogs. Thank you, man.
Congratulations. And let me tell you, I envy you because I'm in Virginia and I would love to leave this state and go to Florida with you. That's where I want to go. Beautiful place. Um,
Parole's holding you back?
no, just
Oh,
I got a house and I guess a lot of ties to the area. So maybe at
gotcha.
some point, maybe at some point for sure, you got a fiance, a child on the way. You're doing the personal training. You're successful to some degree doing that. I mean, I'm seeing your place in the background. It looks like a nice enough place. And all of
Yeah,
this, considering the fact that at 16 years old, you went to prison for essentially a 26-year prison sentence, 25 to life. And look at you now.
thank you, man. I appreciate it, man.
You are, how old are you now?
Big trip. I'm 49 years old.
Man, I mean, it's just crazy to think. You get out in 2018. Talk about your anxiety walking out on that very first day, and what was your very first day like after serving 26 years?
Man, my anxiety, my first days out, like just how to use a phone. How to use a phone was one that like every day for the first 2 months, I want to slam my phone into a wall. Just learning how to use that iPhone. But thank God the iPhones aren't too hard to use.
How was it?
And
Real quick, let me just jump in here. I don't mean to cut you off, but I
sure.
want to stay on that thought. I You mentioned how hard it was to learn to phone. What was it like for you to walk out into the world and see everybody glued to their phones?
It was worse. It was worse because I didn't see them glued to the phones. They all had these Bluetooth headphones in. So people are just walking around talking, and you think they're talking to somebody or they're talking to themselves. In reality, just like I got this Bluetooth in now, they're all talking on their phone. It was confusing. Another thing that confused me, everyone had on backpacks. I was thinking everyone was children until I started noticing like all these adults, dudes with gray beards wearing backpacks. And one of the things that probably pissed me off the most was I walked into a gym, into a New York sports club. I wanted to apply for a job as a personal trainer. They're like, you got to apply for a job online. I don't know online. I've never been online. The internet was born in 1994. I was arrested in 1991, and I didn't know how to apply for a job online without the help of people. Other people helping me. My ex-wife, friends that I made. People like that. It was hard. It was hard. Crossing the street, the cars, the way the cars move so quick.
The whole world was moving so quick.
Everything was moving quick. Yeah, everything felt jam packed for me. Being on trains gave me a lot of anxiety. Uh, being around wealthy people gave me anxiety. Being around square people gave me anxiety. If I was in the worst hood, I felt comfortable because I felt like I wouldn't be judged.
And it's kind of like, because that's like its own little prison system as well. And not to like
Yeah,
stereotype people or anything like that, but I want to throw in my personal experience. I served 7 years in prison. When I came home, I can relate to everything that you're saying right there. I never knew about a smartphone until I was released. I went into a bank for the very first time. I went into a Walmart for the very first time. And I almost had an anxiety attack in both of those situations. I can't even imagine after 26 years in prison what your anxiety situation was like. It had to be intensified, by a
it was
hundred.
tough. It was tough. It was tough. I can't lie to you. It took me several months. For a long time, like I only wanted to be around other dudes I knew from prison. You know what I mean? Because I needed them. I need to see them doing good, and I need them to explain things to me because like only they understood. Because they walked the path that I was walking. You know, it was a trip, man. It was a hard trip. I became alcoholic for a little while. I was never a drinker. I started drinking when I came out of prison.
Did you need
You know,
that
I know
just to be able to cope?
I didn't necessarily need it to be able to cope, but once my wife and I separated, once I was single, I found that, I have a couple of drinks, like talking to women was like just so easy
Yeah,
after that, once
yeah,
I had the alcohol in my system.
right.
And before you know it, that's all I was doing, going out. And I began drinking way too much for about 3 years. Yeah, for about 3 years. And then I had to catch myself and just stop cold turkey because it started bringing out a bad side of me, not feeling myself, could become an angry drunk. It just and I'm a personal trainer. What the hell am I poisoning my body for with that, you know? And that was that was something because I never really had drug addictions, anything like that before. I never dealt with that before.
I want to ask about, any kind of social media presence that you have. You first got in contact with me while I was doing a live stream. You had a username up there. Is that a YouTube channel that you have? Something you're trying to do?
Yeah. I just started making some short videos. I just started my own YouTube channel called Real Prison Talk with Tommy. Um, I'm also on the IG with the same name, Real Prison Talk with Tommy, as well as Coach Tommy underscore fitness. That's another IG page I have, mostly highlighting, what I do as a business in the personal training field.
Yeah, I'm going to link those down below on this video so that people can go check you out. What do you plan on doing with the YouTube channel, especially? You're going to be telling prison stories over there or anything like that?
Yeah. I think I just want to start talking everything prison. I really don't know where to go with it now, but definitely use my life and use my experience as a cautionary tale, a deterrent, a cautionary tale, a way to de-glorify crime, prison, and the whole culture of it, because it's a culture in and of itself. Crime and prison is a culture in and of itself, and there's certain channels that glorify that. I'd rather de-glorify it. I'd rather tell you the ugly side. I'd rather tell you about my losses than about the good times.
I'll say a couple of things in relation to all of that. I've been doing this for a long time, and I've seen a lot of new faces come into this. And you're right, there are channels that like to glorify it, but the reason why they are doing that is because that's what people want to see. They want to hear the train wrecks. They want to hear the nitty gritty because a lot of these people will or have never experienced anything like this. Again, looking at the side of your face right there is something that most people could never even imagine going through.
And while I was part of a program called the Youth Assistance Program. It's I hate to use the term scared straight, but that's what people think of Scared Straight. This was more of an interactive dialogue, and I really got through to some of them kids. Like I could see the difference. In fact, I remember one day we were talking to a young girl. We were getting pretty deep with her, and she admitted to the first time that she was being violated at home. That right there, like that one, like it showed me that by us sharing our stories, it's meaningful and it gives young people the courage to share their own. Uh, Also, too, what I've learned is that a lot of young people can't really connect the dots between the trauma in their lives and their behaviors. Why are you acting out? Why are you doing this? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. But when they hear other people's story, they can connect the dot in another person's story. And sometimes being able to see it in someone else's story, they can start making sense of it in their own lives. So, it's yeah, that's pretty much that. That's what motivates me. That's what motivates me, hoping I can reach somebody.
I'm sure you will, so long as you put forth the effort to create the content to be able to do so. This could be a great launching point for anything that you're trying to do and anything that you've already started. And again, like I said, I'll certainly be linking your Instagrams and that YouTube channel with this video.
Appreciate it.
Um, I'm going to ask, one or two more questions, then we're going to wrap this up.
Sure.
One thing that comes to mind after all of this time that you served, only being home since 2018, going through a bout of, alcohol addiction, how do you feel like you're faring out here after all of this time? And what do you feel like you still struggle with? Are there things that you still struggle with that are just remnants of being in prison for as long as you were?
I mean, I'm faring pretty good mentally. I've got my health, I've got my mind. I'm faring pretty good. I've got a strong relationship with my fiance. Looking forward to the birth of my son this December coming up. What I still struggle with is technology, being pretty much computer illiterate. That is a big thing where I need help with everything. Um, yeah, that's a huge obstacle for me. It's been an obstacle for me and continues to be an obstacle for me. And trying to catch up in the tech world
And that's so ironic to hear, considering that you have a personal trainer fitness business that you run
online.
primarily online. How are you doing that? You got your fiance helping you get this thing set up?
Well, I learned how to do that. I learned how to use Zoom basically.
Yeah.
Zoom, FaceTime. To train my clients and keep my schedule book and send out my invitations. So I've got that part of it down. But when it comes to God, every time I go into any website and they ask for a password, I get nervous. I'm the grand master at changing passwords. I forget I forget every password I ever made,
Yeah.
But that's a continuing struggle for me. That really is. And then also, thinking that in February I'm going to be 50 years old. I'm 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 living pretty decently. I'm eating while I'm paying rent, but there's nothing beyond that. What about where am I going to be at in 10 years from now? Where am I going to be at 15 years? What if my health fails in some way? I don't know. I don't know. What will I do for work then? I don't know how to do anything else. But I'm sure I would find a way like I always do. But those are some of the things that are concerning. Because the average person my age has been working for 20, 30 years. They may own their home, they may own a business, they may have a lot of things going on. I've got a business, I got a small business, I rent, and my future is just it's not secure. I simply didn't have those decades out here working. I wasted that part of my life in prison.
Well,
Maybe not wasted, might not be the proper word, but spent those years in prison.
one thing about it, you still got, every single day to be looking toward and working on the future. You spent 26 years in
Indeed.
prison, 27 years in prison. You could write a book. You could definitely take this social media thing
Yeah.
very serious because everybody is doing so. And with the amount of time that you've served, you could be telling prison stories for the rest of your life, I imagine.
Yeah.
Like I had said, if this is something that you want to do, you feel free to reach out to me. You've got my number. You've got any questions, I'll try to guide you any way that I can, help you in any way that I can with it. I am going to go ahead and wrap this up. Thomas, it's been an absolute pleasure getting the opportunity
Likewise.
to speak with you, to hear your story. I'm honored that you've shared this with us. As we wrap this up, anything that you want to leave everybody with?
Well, I guess there is one thing, man. Just and it's just a concept I realized in prison. Every choice you make matters. Every time you make the wrong choice, every time you go against your conscience, every time you make that wrong decision, the bad choice, not necessarily, we're all going to make bad choices, but every time you go against your conscience, every time you go against, what's right, the choices that come before you become more and more limited until you paint yourself into a corner. And likewise, every time you make that right decision, every time you stand up for what's right, every time you go with your conscience and you make your decisions based upon that, the choices that come before you are going to open up bigger and bigger and bigger. And so every choice matters. That's what I leave everyone with.
That's a really good piece. I appreciate you sharing that with us, Thomas. Absolute pleasure getting the opportunity to get to know you here and introduce you here on After Prison Show. And I'll definitely look forward to keeping in contact with you.
Appreciate you, man. It's been a real pleasure, Joe.
Hey, Thomas, take care, and I'll talk with you soon, okay?
All right. Have a great night.
You too.